This is an interview with Ann Stacey, née Moa, born 28th of November 1931. Right, good afternoon, Ann. Now, tell me a little bit about your first memories and where you were, perhaps.
Well, when my parents first married in 1930, for 5 years, we lived in Hampstall Road. My father came down with his 3 brothers and his parents to Hockley, and they lived on the high road of Hockley. Do you want to hear anything about my father's family or not?
Anything that's interesting, especially around Hockley and the Rochford Hundred,
Yes,
anything around there would be
yes.
interesting.
Well, my mother was a co, and my grandfather, her father, was born in Stanets in Paglesham, and he then had quite an adventure. He went to Australia, and he did. He was a steeplechase jockey for a little while,
oh, wow.
but didn't do very, very well. But he lost all his money, what he took with him, and he came home steerage. Well, he then set up. He lived then in London, which was rather strange because they lived in Rayleigh Gardens at Islington, I think.
Right.
And anyway, he then thought, well, what do I do now? I've got a family. And he became a bookmaker.
Oh, okay.
But he wouldn't conform to having his man that helps him. He wouldn't go into offices, so he gave that up, and he did quite well. But then he decided he would come down to Hockley, and he bought Blunk's farm just before you go under the railway bridge, and the house is still standing there, Blunk's. It was quite a posh house, but they didn't have a lot of money to keep it going. You know, they
Right.
kept it going, but anyway, his son sold it about 1940, in the early 1940s, practically gave it away. And but anyway, my mother was the only one left out of 4 that didn't have to go into the First World War. I know I'm going on to my grandfather's mother's side just for a little while. My mother, they had a well. She was a little soul, and she was the only one left, and they didn't have water. I presume they didn't have too much. I don't know if they had running water in the house, I'm not sure, but she used to have a yoke, and there was still there a big well, and she used to have to get all the water up for the animals that they had on the farm. But she, when she was born, her mother, she had to come out of her bed, taken out of her mother's bedroom at 4 days old, because her mother was dying of TB, and it wiped out all her mother's family, but not one on her father's family got it.
Wow.
And anyway, it was a bit of a struggle, and she was very close to her sister, who was very close in age, and my mother, of course, was the youngest. But anyway, it affected my mother, I think, for the rest of her life. Well, anyway, now I'll come back to my grandfather is buried in Stanbridge Church.
Okay.
And his grave's there in that Stanbridge Church. And anyway, I come back to my father's side, which was Moa, and his father, when he was the eldest of 10, he came up to London to work. I know nothing much about him,
Okay.
but he did very well, and he was quite, I would say he was quite a clever person, very just so in all ways, and they lived on the corner of Folly Lane, the wooden house on the corner of Folly Lane. And he used to go to London every day to work in London. This is when he came down from London.
This probably would have been in the days of the steam train
Yes,
as well.
yes. And he used to go up to London, and he was a very precise man, very precise. But he did very well. He went into Minton Tiles, and he gradually rose from being the office boy up to he was managing to finished up. He was a very good salesman, but he worked his way up and he finished up as a managing director of Minton Tiles. But I don't know him because he died when I was a year old.
Right.
My grandmother, she was. This is whether it interests anybody, I don't know. She was very fortunate. She was born in quite a family with a bit of money. They weren't posh people. I don't know, but she had two brothers in the leather trade, and they had this. I don't know how it all came about, but they had a leather shop and handbags and all that kind of thing in one of the well-known places in London. It wasn't Oxford Street, it was down Regent Street, I think. Well, anyway, I don't know how old she was, I've only been told about this, she went to see her brothers. They opened up a shop in New York, and she went over, obviously by boat, and of course those days she had her own personal maid with her, and anyway she went to New York. But I don't remember her very, very well, but she was a very, very nice person. But anyway, my grandfather died, then she had the house next door built, which is now, unrecognisable to what she had it. And she died early part of the war. Right. Now, my father was the bit of a black sheep of the family. He was always up to tricks and always he didn't worry too much, where his three brothers were totally different. But anyway, his father despaired of him. But anyway, when they got married, went to Hampstead Road, when I was 5, in 1937, on the 1st of March, we moved to Little Wakering in Barling Road, and my father rented a biggish house which he didn't want, nor did my mother, but he wanted the land for he gradually cleared the land up. There wasn't no much money for machinery or anything then, and that was 1937. And anyway, he progressed, and he was quite a good grower and he had a greengrocer's round, and he had a lorry, and it was all, quite nicely done, and he did very well during the war, but he was never a man that worried about money. He didn't spend a lot, but it wasn't terribly important to him. Well, anyway, I now go back. Now, when I was...
So did that business carry on through the war and after the war?
Yes, he then...
Was it known as Mowers?
Yes, he had a shop for 25 years in Lee Broadway.
Okay.
Greengrocer's shop, where he sold everything that he could grow.
Okay.
He grew a lot of stuff, and he had 6 acres, and the ground in Barling is absolutely beautiful, like it is in Stanbridge. And anyway, he jogged along, and I was an only child because my mother wasn't allowed to have any more children.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, he then, went in just after the war. He had this shop in the Broadway in Lee, and he was there for 25 years. But in the meantime, the vivid memory is the first day of the war.
Okay.
And I was then staying with my grandfather and my mother's sister and I used to stay there a lot at Hockley, and the church bells rang at 11, and my aunt used to have a little car, and she drove me back to Barling. And I have a friend, on that day when I got home, we were having 2 coaches coming down from London with evacuees.
Okay.
One with children with their mothers, babies and under 5-year-olds, but the other ones went to the local school at Great Wakering. And anyway, I remember the first day of the war. My friend who lived was just in Barling Road and only lived right near. We sat on her garden wall to watch the coaches come down through Beecham's and down to Stone Bridge and along to past where we lived, and there was a tea shop. They used to come from Southend on the coaches, but all these people with evacuees and mothers and children and the older children, they all went into this sort of tea house, tea gardens.
Yeah.
And anyway, they sent us the wrong coach, though they came down together. The one that should have gone to Great Wakering came to us, and so we had the Great Wakering coach with the mothers and babies and young children, and the children to school were sent to Great Wakering by mistake. But anyway, my mother, of course, we had this biggish house, which was not far, we couldn't afford to keep it as it should have been, but we did a bit, we did our best, let's put it that way. And anyway, my mother had to go down, she hated this, she had to go down and pick out. She was supposed to had to have 2 mothers and about 5 children, or 6 children, I can't remember it. And this was the afternoon that war broke out. And she had to pick 2 mothers and their children, and she hated it. Anyway, they came back to where we lived, which was at the Firs, Barling Road. And anyway, I vaguely remember being invaded by these children, but they didn't last long because they were unhappy. They were used to being in London, and they were unhappy. They didn't like it. Was quite countrified. It is just around there, and they weren't happy. And I think it was about a week later, the husband turned up and took them back to London, so we didn't have them very long.
Oh, right.
But the older children stayed in Great Wakering for much longer. So,
were you at school in Great Wakering?
No, I went to Barling School.
Oh, you went to Barling School?
Yes, and I went to Barling School all through most of the war, and I remember vividly we used to walk home from Barling School round home, about a mile and a bit, and what they did, the odd plane, German plane, this is about 1941 or something like that, and I remember that we had to jump in the ditch because any movement of anybody, they were coming down and firing. But we jumped in the ditch, I remember it vividly, and fortunately we got away with it. But anyway, we toddled home, but we had to use the bus after that to come home for our bit of dinner, and then catch the bus back again, so once an hour.
So how far from the school did you live?
I would say it's 2 miles.
2 miles, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so that's what I remember.
Quite a long walk for walking home for lunch.
Yes, it was. I thought it was unnecessary, but obviously didn't have
school lunches in those days.
Well, all we had when it was cold, having the little milk bottles on the stove in in one of the classrooms, and that warmed up, and that was what the only thing we had was hot milk.
All right.
We didn't have no school dinners or anything like that.
You wouldn't get stoves in classrooms now?
No.
Health and safety?
No. I vividly remember that.
Yeah.
And anyway, it was a very go-ahead little school, and they got to us, quite a few through to the grammar school.
Oh,
I wasn't old enough then.
Right.
And anyway, unfortunately, our headmaster that ran the school very, very well. I remember him as if I saw him yesterday. He was very strict, but he kept order. But he unfortunately died very suddenly, and we had a new headmaster, and he couldn't control the older ones.
Right.
After that. It was just the end of all that, and they didn't get through. Many got through to 11 plus up. That wasn't.
What was the first headmaster's name? Oh.
Mr. Shepherd.
Mr. Shepherd. Ah.
See, I've got a good memory.
Very good. Was he a local man?
I don't know. No, I don't know quite where he came from, because I went there at 5,
Right.
and he lived with his wife, who also was a teacher, and she was fairly strict. They lived in the school house next door to the school, and so. But I know we had to go in the air raid shelters when there was a siren go, until we weren't allowed home until the siren went all clear.
Yep.
And I know one occasion, it was about 5:30, we were still in the shelter, which was ghastly, horrible brick building. And anyway, my father had this, his van or whatever, and he came down. How they got in touch, because I don't know. But anyway, he turns up and takes all the children back but on the way home. At High House had a few, and he picked up quite a few, and they all went in the back of the van, and my father dropped them all home.
Lovely.
Couldn't do that now, could we?
No, difficult.
Very difficult. But anyway, the teachers had to stay until we all left.
Absolutely. Did you have many sort of attacks and things? Because a lot of the planes used to come back from London, didn't they, along the river?
Yes. Well, our house, we had a doodlebug, and we used to be in the hall. The hall was quite protected. And my father went out, because they stopped, they stopped. And he came in, and his face was white as a sheet. And that doodlebug, it wasn't a rocket, a doodlebug, came down in the field, not opposite, but just one side of us. And it missed our house really, really very, very low. It stopped, see, it wasn't running, but it stops before they get to you. But we were very fortunate. We had the front door blown in, and the lock, I can remember the lock with a lump of wood on it, that was all blown in. We had nice glass in the front door. This house was, I never found out when it was built. And anyway, we had all the ceiling, most of the ceilings down, and we lost all the windows in the front of the house, because that took the full blast. But I don't know, but that wasn't the only time that the house, we had this horrible stuff they put over the window. We had no central heating or anything like that, and we eventually got glass in, but we would then, I cannot remember what happened, but once we'd had the windows in, not very long, we had another a rocket over a similar area, because they were shooting them down, and because we were in line.
Yes.
Hockley was also in the got a few.
Right.
And all the windows went out again.
Oh goodness.
So that's what I remember of the war.
And what about to the end of the war? Do you remember VE Day and what happened? Was there celebrations in the school and things?
Not a lot. No, not a lot. I cannot remember a lot.
Okay,
I don't think we did.
I know there was always the sort of digging for victory and grow for victory and things. I assume that your father was asked to do quite a lot with his land and things.
Well, he had full intention when he bought it in 1930. When we moved there in 37, he had full intention, because he got 2 small orchards, pears, and then apples and plums, and the person who built it, obviously, it was quite. He'd done a lot, got a pigsties there, and we had the front garden which was neglected, and my father was more worried about getting the land. And I remember him getting it, and he had a young chap work for him for many years, and I remember the piles of twitch that they had where they were digging this, a piece at a time and burning this, and he gradually got it round. So by the war, he'd been there 2 years. He was being able by then to grow a certain amount of stuff.
Right.
But nice. he managed to sell everything he grew.
That's very good. Very good.
Because people were wanting fresh stuff as well.
Absolutely. For the war. So you were 14 when the war ended.
Yes.
And
yes.
then, so what happened to you then?
Well, I was unfortunate. I wasn't very. Now they'd say I was a little dyslexic.
Okay.
Well, now most children seem to be, but those days I'd never heard of the word, and I was no way would I get 11 plus from Barling, and my mother tried her best and everything. It was on my father's side, this spelling business, not on my mother's side. And anyway, they sent me to Clark's College.
Okay.
Well,
which was where?
In Southend.
Okay.
And I was there when R.A. Jones, the jurors in the High Street, was bombed.
Okay.
So that was June. I went there about 42, 43.
Right. So sort of 11 to 12 when you would have gone up to senior school, and then so you went to Clark's College. Okay. And whereabouts was Clark's College?
In Victoria Avenue.
Oh, Victoria. Okay.
Am I going on to?
No, that's fine. It's all interesting. It's all interesting stuff. And so what? And how was your time at Clark's College?
Well, I had a very good teacher, and I was beginning to get on. I was good at art and all that kind of thing, but because my spelling held me back, and my mother took me out of Clark's College to go to St Michael's in Hadley Road, Lee, and I wasn't very good at school, I'm afraid. I really wasn't. And I was a bit of a problem, really. But I never, ever school I went to, there was never, ever a cooker. You never learnt cooking. Now, that was the thing that if I had had the chance, I could do that and decorate cakes and all that kind of thing, and I went to evening classes for that. But being, then my mother died very tragically in 1950, and, nowadays it would have been picked up, but of course it wasn't. And I looked after my father, because the times were different then,
So sorry, just to interrupt there, what did you do between, so you were at Clark's College until you were, 16?
Yes,
15, 16?
Yes, 16.
So that was about just after the end of the war. What did you do after that? Did you have a job, or
no,
you worked at?
No, I didn't. No, there was. I helped my father.
Okay.
Actually, he did. He grew flowers and all sorts of things. I used to help him get the stuff ready to go up to Lee on the lorry. So, which nowadays this would never have happened. Nowadays that would never have happened.
It still sounds quite good. You're out there working on the land and things, and working with the flowers and the vegetables and things. So that's all good.
But cooking was the thing that my mother was a good cook, but I really, one thing I could do was cook. It was just rather unfortunate, really. My mother wasn't very well, but then, of course, when she went, it was very tragic. and it took it out of me, and my father, of course, and I, looked after. I did, carried on doing what I did, and also looked after my father because I was an only child. So there you are. So
that takes us up to about 1950 when your mother died, and you carried on looking after your father. So when did you leave Barling and come?
Well, I came to Scots Hall Farm. I married David Stacey, the second son. He didn't have a lot of education because during the war, his father he was a very good hard worker, and he used to make excuses not to go to, send a letter that, David got a sore throat or something, and he worked very hard. The whole Stacey family worked terribly hard. They were very hard working, and there were 6 of them, and he had a farm up at Hanningfield. And when I got married, we went to Scots Hall. And
but the Stacey family farm was Hanningfield, was it?
Yeah, they were all born. The whole 6 were born at Hanningfield.
Okay.
And
what made you? Was that David identified Scots Hall as a place he wanted to be at?
Well, it wasn't a case that I think it was a case that it's a similar story to me. He was I think a little dyslexic as well, but he was a good farmer, but he was a worker. He in the mornings he was out there all well before they should start.
Right.
He didn't always have a very good name because he was so sharp, and he was always out there when we had Father Stacey in 1947. He bought Scots Hall and New Hall.
Okay.
But he only had the intention of coming down to buy New Hall. He hadn't got much money to buy it, but he was one of them people, and they were then living at Southminster, and still held on to the Hanningfield one, and that obviously was what they...
that was their base.
But if you got, sort of Offin and Rumsey in those days, but if you've got a farm, it's a small farm. They've bought a lot, and the eldest son, Peter, who now has died, he had that when he got married. They got married before us, and Sam went to Newhall when he got married. Right. But Father Stacey took a tremendous gamble where very few people never would dream of doing.
Did he do it through the Agricultural Mortgage Corporation or something like that? He just
no. It was often Rumsey who were the selling it.
Oh, they were selling it.
And they didn't particularly. I've only heard this story recently. Particularly like the person that was really interested. So anyway, they encouraged. We always called him Father Stacey to. With their help and everything, and having their farm at Hanningfield, persuaded him to buy both farms. But when his wife, which is David's mother, his wife, and I didn't know her, she died before I knew them. Before I knew them well. I've got to think now. She never saw what he was coming down and looking at.
Right.
And he goes home because he was going to buy just New Hall, see? And she hadn't got a clue because she didn't see the house or anything. When he arrives home, they always said the story. He walked in, he said, well, I bought Scots Hall as well. The poor woman, was struggling at Hanningfield. I can tell you she was struggling. And but that was what he was like and what the women had to put up with.
Quite. Go out for one farm and come home with 2. It's quite an extravagant piece of purchasing, really.
Yeah.
And so Sam had New Hall, and David had Scots Hall. And what was Scots Hall like when you first? Because I found some old photographs of it with a moat around it.
Yeah.
Did it have the moat when you moved there? Oh, right.
Yeah, but it was not the original Scots Hall.
Right.
It was, they found a lot of bricks and what have you up the road behind Scots Hall.
Oh, did they? Okay.
A field, about the second field away from
Okay.
Scots Hall, going up the road towards Canewdon,
Right.
where the original Scots Hall was.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's
I think that's true. I came in a bit later. See?
I'll have to look up on the old maps and see.
Yes, but and the behind Scots Hall, it was very neglected. There was, carts sort of in the brambles. It was in a terrible state, and David gradually cleared it up.
And who was the owners? But I know the Cater family owned it.
Yeah.
But what did you buy from the Caters or buy off in Rumsey?
I think I'm not so sure. I know my own history that bit better.
Right.
But I think the Caters were here.
Right. Well, they certainly were there in the 1920s and 30s.
Yes.
I just wondered whether you bought it from them or their successors.
I think there was quite a big family.
Yes.
And I think it definitely was the Caters that they bought it off.
Right.
Through auction,
Yeah.
and that.
Because I know the Cater family had the Ballards Gore brickworks as well
Yes.
on the stage.
Yes.
Because there's not much. I don't even know whether there's any photographs of that or anything like that.
I
I'm not
haven't
sure.
got any photographs.
I just wondered, and I know the Cater family were there when the big fire where the Shepherd and Dog is, when that took place. The Cater family bought that from Eric's father.
Oh.
And they bought that and part of the golf course as well, which expanded out the land, I think. So, so they were quite influential at the time, but you said it was quite run down by the time you got there.
Well, yes, it was, but it wasn't David's younger sister, when the mother died. She had a stroke. She was only 50. I think she was 54 or 56. I'm not sure.
Quite young.
Yes, and of course she'd had 6 children in 9 years.
That'll wear you out.
Yes, and she also, the story goes round, because I'm on this talking about the Stacey family now, aren't I? The story, and I'm pretty certain it's true. When she was at Hanningfield, every farmer had a small herd of cows. And anyway, every farmer in the area, all over the place around this area. And anyway, she had 3 under 5, and she used to go out early in the morning with 3 under 5 in the pram while she helped with the milking. And the Peter, who died a year ago, tipped the pram over, and the whole 3 came out of the pram.
Goodness.
And talk about times being hard. She used to go out and pick blackberries to make a little bit of money. Times were very, very, very hard, but for most people, I think.
I think so. And this was what, the 50s?
They came to Scots Hall, in 47.
Right. And when did you first go there?
Beginning of 59.
Oh, okay. Right. So they had the farm quite a few years before that.
Yes,
you went there.
yes.
David
was 16. I've got a lovely story about which Rosemary Roberts. Do you know Rosemary Roberts? Which she's always been a little upset because I've never got round to doing it. But I think it's a very interesting story. Have you got time to hear it?
Carry on.
Now, this is all true. Absolutely true. Everything I've told you, because I've been told the story. But Sidney Cripps, have you heard of Sidney Cripps?
I've heard the name, yes.
Well, it was in end of September, 29th of September, when they moved. I've got to think of the year. It was his 21st birthday, and they had cattle at Southminster, and they were moving from Southminster to Scots Hall.
Right.
And they had this cattle, They had about 50 head of cattle, with a few very young calves as well. And they had Sydney and David was 16. Sydney and David, they had one bicycle between them, because Father Stacey, with Peter, the eldest son, I don't know where the young Sam was, but he wasn't about on this occasion, and he went off with, they started out with them, but he wanted to go to a sale. That was far more interesting. And he went with Peter in the car to a local farm sale, but he obviously took the car, and he took their lunch. So they had no lunch with them, and one bicycle and one dog. And they drove these cattle from Southminster and along, obviously, Wooden Ferris Road, the old road, and to I think they went to New Hall. They were going to New
right
Hall.
round by road, via Battles Bridge and all the way down.
Over Battles Bridge, yes.
Horsley Lane, Lower Road.
Yes, and David, when we ever came along the old Wooden Ferris Road, he'd say, that's where we had to leave some of the calves. And the calves, of course, couldn't keep going.
No.
And they had to drop these calves off. There were several calves and youngsters with the cows, and they had to drop them because they was just getting too much for them. Yeah. And so they dropped these calves off to be picked up at probably, I don't know when they picked them up, the next day, I don't know. But David, and because they started off, these cows, great, they were going along and trying to get into every gateway that they found, but when they started to get tired, they stopped doing that. They just went quietly along the road, or fairly quietly, and they eventually, I don't know what time they started, and I don't know what time they got to New Hall, but it was pretty late. It got to New Hall. It was pretty late, and they put them in the what field they had to go in, and Sydney and David had an old tractor to drive home back to Southminster. And and Rosemary's always wanted this story. She said it must get put down before there's nobody else to put it down. And I didn't know them then.
We've got it put down now.
Yeah, and that was in 1947.
1947. September 47.
Yeah.
Ah, lovely. No, it's interesting to see how things had to be done in those days, wasn't it? Absolutely. So you're 1959 in Scots Hall.
Yeah, beginning of 1959.
So what were your first impressions of Scots Hall?
Well, I knew it quite well, right. Because Elizabeth, the youngest daughter, is a worker. They're nearly all workaholics, and she was a workaholic, and she was a bit fiery. She still is. And works like a Trojan. They can't stop. They just can't stop. And I had never had the energy as what they all had. Only one sister went and worked in the bank in Southminster, then in Southend.
Right.
And she's now 87, I think. And her husband's still alive. And anyway, so all the rest worked. Peter worked quite a bit up at Hanningfield because he was married with a family, and he did the farm at Hanningfield, and they bought more land early days up there. And anyway, so David farmed and Sam, they farmed Scots Hall and New Hall. But David, he really, I don't think Sam would like to hear this, but David really, 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 really was very, he was very he worked terribly hard, and he was always, his meals had to be on time, and he used to be out there by 7, before 7, because the men started at 7, and then they had their breakfast at 8:30 till 9, and David came in at 8:30 till 9 and had his breakfast, and occasionally had to make few phone calls, but they weren't like they are today. And he would be out, then come in at 12 o'clock for his lunch. It had to be proper food, not the modern food. And he went out at 5 to 1, so he was always working with.
And then finished
at 5.
At 5.
That was, unless it was. Yes. But they had what was in their favour in 49. I know 49 was a very good year. I remember the weather. I wasn't here then. I was at Barling, and the weather was with them at harvest, because they had a very old combine and chugged along, but they were very fortunate for about 2 or 3 harvests, and they had good weather.
We had the very bad winter in 47.
Oh, yes.
It was making up for that for a few years afterwards.
Yes, I was at Barling then. My father and the chap who worked for him dug. We had snowdrifts in Barling, and he dug his way out after 5 days.
Gosh.
And the snow.
Oh, bother,
That's all right.
I should turn it off.
Hasn't the world changed?
Sorry, I should have turned it off.
I'm fairly easygoing.
Carry on.
It is unbelievable, these stories, how they worked. And we had the cows, and of course we had a cowman, but David still did his, when he was weekend off, he always did that, and he did like when it was Christmas, David would do Christmas Day, so I always now associate Christmas with work.
Well, I think once you've got livestock, you don't have a day off, do you? Arable farmers can take a day here or there, but livestock, you can't.
No, and anyway, why they had them, Perkins had them, because Alex still had a big herd, but most farmers didn't have any at New Hall, but most farmers down here in this area had, because when they got the milk check every month, David, he was very strict with himself and obviously with me. Long as he had that check paid for all his wages, which were very small, and he paid every expense of that month. Right. And also to feed us. So
the milk really provided cash flow, whereas the arable kept, there's an annual income that allowed you to build. Okay, it's interesting. So that's why they kept the cows.
Yes, that was the reason. And long as David had tuppence over, he was satisfied. Right. And he made, remind you, I never remember him not having any change over, but it was sometimes very, very small, but long as he had something.
And did you grow the farm? Did you buy any extra land, or was
the
farm...
David didn't, he wanted to buy the golf club, this field, right. But he was too late.
Right.
But anyway...
and who owned that in those days?
Caton's.
Right.
They're not at the golf club now, are they?
Right.
And Mr. Caton, but David was always a bit upset he didn't get it. But he bought a bit up the back.
You've got the other field next to the Shepherd and Dog, because John farms that, doesn't he?
Yeah, but that was, Cater's bought that off, the people, Cater's bought that at a later date, it's just one field.
Right, okay. Interesting. And now, in terms of what you farm, though, now Richard does pigs today. Have you always done pigs as well?
We've always had pigs. When we gave up the herd in 1963,
right.
We gave up the cows, which most people did at that time. We then went in for pigs. Now, David did very, very well with pigs. But unfortunately, they haven't been so good in the last few years.
No, it's difficult.
And Richard, unfortunately, doesn't really have all. David wasn't. He pushed Richard too hard, and Richard has suffered from it ever since. He's not a well person.
No, it's not. Well, the Perkises carried on with their cows for a long time,
Quite.
didn't they?
Oh yes, because
of the who was the chap, the dairyman?
yes, his eldest daughter helped me, I always had a little bit of help over there, and she helped me. And
what was his name? Mr.
Hersher.
Hersher? Hersher was it?
I don't know.
Yeah, Hersher.
I might have it down in one of my diaries.
Because he lived in my house, didn't he? In Gore
Yes,
Farm for a long time. And when he retired and they stopped the cows, then they kept going for him pretty much, didn't they? I think.
Yeah.
So.
He was a decent man.
I gather he was a good cowman.
Yes, and he was a good man, a very good man. He now was he German?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, his wife wasn't. She died fairly recently.
I believe so. Yes. So
yes, because see, Rosemary, it was the eldest. She was a hard-working girl. Right. Very hard-working.
Now, when you first moved here, you came out of Barling and into Canewdon, and did you already know some people in Canewdon? Was Sam already here or not?
Yes.
Sam was already there.
Yes.
So you knew Sam up at Canewdon.
Yes. Yes.
So what was life like in the village in those days?
Well, I never got very involved with the village.
Okay.
Never, because at one stage there was a lot of hijinks going on, but also David was the type that I wasn't sort of. It wasn't unkind, but it didn't. I didn't marry me to go and be sitting around having coffee. I mean, and all that kind of thing, because I had enough to do without going up to Canewdon. Mr. Uni, he used to come once a week on Friday with his van after he'd closed the shop. But there was very few that I knew.
So there wasn't much sort of social involvement?
Well, there was a bit, but I never got involved.
Was there sort of young farmers events?
Yes.
Like that?
Rochford Young Farmers. I was one of the original members. That was formed in I've got to think now. It's either 49 or 47. I think it was 49 that was formed.
Is it still going?
No, there was an awful lot of youngsters at the same age group when I was there, and then the next lot, all the youngsters of that generation were old enough to come into they kept it going, but it's been closed down now for quite a few years. I haven't got the date in my mind on that.
That was usually quite a good thing.
That was a very, very, very. It was very, very good. We had good fun. We used to meet in Delph House, which was a lovely little cafe in the middle of Rochford, near where the dentist is now.
Okay.
And it's opposite the fountain. And we used to go there, and we used to have. Because we weren't used to Scottish dancing, but when we went to other young farmers, a lot of people came down from Scotland.
All right.
Oh yeah, a terrific number, and not many people from Essex, because the Essex farmers went broke. A lot of them did, including my grandfather. The Coe family went down, I think, and then of course when the Scottish farmers came in. This is going back many, many years. But they do Scottish dancing every other dance. They always put a dance. Each Young Farmers had a dance, so we had lots of dances to go to, and we did Scottish dancing. And of course we used to practice in Delph House. I cannot remember. We used to have a cup of tea and a biscuit. And I cannot remember how much it was, how much we had to pay for the hall. I can't remember that so clearly, but it was we had a wonderful evening, really learning these dances, and we had hysterics, and we had good fun, and it was only for pence, no drink. Not that it was just allowed, they didn't sell drink.
Now, I know you said you liked your art when you were at school, and I know you're part of the art club up at Ashington. So have you done lots of art things during that time? Was there always sort of art classes and things to do with that in the town?
Paglesham had an art class.
Okay.
And it's got one now again.
Okay.
But I don't go because I don't like going out in the evenings now.
Right.
Yes, I started the art. I was very good at map drawing at Clark's College, and I was always good at that. And so I had it there from day one. But of course, we didn't do much art at Barling School because you didn't have the equipment.
Right. Is Barling School still there as it was?
Yes, but it's now. The new school is opposite it. I think that's Little Wakering Road by then, but the building's there, and it was a dance studio.
Okay.
I don't know if it is now. I think it is, but I used to ride as a child, and I used to go down to Cornwall a lot. I was very fortunate.
That's you had the steeplechasing genes in you, did you?
Yes, my grandfather was very. He used to, expect a lot of me as a youngster,
right.
And I was a bit nervy. I was a bit hardly strong.
He was clearly a good horseman if he went off to be a steeplechase jockey, and
he was.
So you learned a few things from him.
Yes, he died when I was about 10, and my father's mother died at a similar time. So I've had no grandparents since the age of 10. And
at least you got to know him for a little while, though.
Yes, I remember him,
That was good.
But he was at Hockley. But going back to steam engines, I love steam engines. Well, when we were at Hockley, the house is still standing, and of course it's had a lot of money spent on it.
Yep.
And I used to watch the trains, the steam trains, going down to
Rochford,
yes, the next station was Hockley.
Yeah.
And then I used to watch the steam trains going up to London, which my grandfather used for many years.
Many years, yes.
And they fascinated me.
Do you get to go on one?
Yes, I can remember, but not clearly.
Right. Good fun thing to do.
Yeah, and I loved them, and that. But I used to have a friend, and she had a pony at the farm, and my aunt bought me a little pony. And he was a lovely pony, and he cost £15. He was quite young, too young for a young child to have, but that's how it happened. And she paid £15 for this pony in Chelmsford Market.
Yeah. So you could buy ponies for £15 in the market in those days.
Yes.
That's quite.
And my shoeing, to have my pony, not this particular one, another little pony I had at Barling, because they had a stable and this little paddock at the back, right at the end of where my father was, and it wasn't posh or anything like that. And I remember taking this pony round to the blacksmith called Mr. Jennings, round towards not Barling School, but on the way. And the first I can remember, this shoe, a full set of shoes, was 4 and 6pence. And
he made them and fitted them, did he?
Yes, he made them. Oh yes.
And get the farrier to fit them, or did he do it as well?
Oh, he did the lot. The blacksmith did the lot.
Yeah, very good. So when you first went to Scots Hall, were you farming all with machinery, or was there still any farming with horses?
No horses. Now, another story with David. When he was 8 years old and they all lived at Hanningfield, David was the only one that didn't catch. I don't remember, it's measles and they didn't have to go to school in those days, right. And they were kept away for several weeks. David never got it, and he was 8 years old. David always told these stories. Pity he's not here today to tell you. He could tell you a lot more. He had with a horse. Father Stacey always bought the as his words were, the broken down horses from London.
Right.
And they were getting old and all the rest of it. And with a set of harrows, he harrowed in 70 acres or 80 acres, I'm not sure. It was either 70 or 80, on his own, while the others were all at home from school with whatever. And he harrowed in, and he was 8 years old, his little legs, he was 8, and he harrowed that amount with a one horse and harrows.
Wow, that's a good
At
story.
8 years old.
Yeah, that set him up to be a hard worker.